it's me Madison, and today we're going to be making these chocolate cake pops. So to start, let's go through everything that came inside of your kit and what tools we're going to need. So of course we have our recipe booklet here, along with our educational activity, and inside your booklet you're going to see that there's a bunch of different baking tips in here and a lot of useful tricks that you're going to use, not just in this recipe, but in a lot of baking. So definitely go through this while you're enjoying a cake pop or while they're in the oven, while your cake's in the oven. And same with the education activity. This one is super cool. If you're into chemistry, it's all about atoms, and you're gonna learn a lot, and it's super fun. So I'll set these aside for now. We're gonna be using our booklet because the instructions are in here as well. I'll show you guys real quick. The instructions are all on the inside, so I'm gonna be using that as well. I'll just put it right here for now. All right, and then of course we have all of our ingredients. So I already opened what I'm going to be using for the cake batter, so I'll just go through those. We have our sugar, flour, cocoa, and we also have another cocoa which we'll be using for the frosting. We have some confectioner sugar, 2 packets of vanilla sugar, one for the frosting and one for the cake batter, of course. And then we have some baking soda, our cake pop sticks, these colorful sprinkles, and then lastly, oh no, I lied, not last. We have our salt to be going in the cake batter, and then lastly our dark chocolate for dipping the cake pops. Okay? So the confectioner sugar and the cocoa powder I'm going to set aside, and of course same with the cake pops and sprinkles. Put those to the side for now, and I'm gonna get started on making the cake to start. But first, before I do that, I'm going to go through all the other ingredients that we're gonna need along with what tools we're gonna need, okay? So I'm gonna open up my booklet here. Okay, so we just went through all of the ingredients in the box, and I'm looking at the first page when you fully open it up, where the recipe is on the top. Because right below that, you're going to see, like I said, everything that we just went through, and then other ingredients that we're going to need. So that includes 3 tablespoons of softened butter. That'll be used for the buttercream, which you'll find out. And same with the 1 to 3 tablespoons of milk. We're going to need 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, 1 egg, a 1/4 cup of water, hot water, 3 mixing bowls, measuring utensils, a lined pan either with grease if you want to grease it so it doesn't stick, or with parchment paper. We're going to need a fork, a spoon, and a microwave safe bowl, and a whisk. I don't know if I said that one yet. Anyway, so we just went through a lot of stuff. Bear with me. I'm going to take you step by step. If I'm going too fast, you can always pause it, rewind it, fast forward it, whatever you have to do, okay? All right, so starting with step number 1. Wash your hands and preheat oven to 350. I already did both of those, so I'm good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and go on to step number 2. And like I said, if you need to pause it, go ahead. You can rewind it, fast forward, whatever you need to do, okay? All right, so step number 2 says place the flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, and salt into a mixing bowl, whisk together, and set aside. All right, so back to this. I'm just going to go ahead and start by pouring all these ingredients in, okay? Take these ones out. Put one of my vanilla sugars to the side for frosting. Alright, so here I have my flour, sugar, they're all in the bowl. Next is the cocoa. Perfect. And then we have our baking soda. All right, and then our salt was the last one. Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna use my whisk and whisk all of this together before we set it aside. And you really just wanna get all these dry ingredients nice and combined together so they're evenly distributed throughout your batter so you get a nice, evenly baked cake, okay? All right. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And next we are going to need another bowl. I have this big bowl here. So moving on to step number 3. It says whisk together the oil, egg, and vanilla sugar. Okay, so I have all those here. pour my oil. And you'll notice I already have everything weighed out, so I think that's a great way to go about baking. You have everything out in front of you. You don't have to stop and scale things. You can just continue through the steps. Okay, that was my oil. That's my egg. And then, last but not least, the vanilla sugar. Perfect. All in the bowl. And now I'm gonna whisk. I'm using the same whisk that I use for the dry ingredients. It's no big deal. You can use it. It's not gonna make a difference, okay? Okay. And really this isn't gonna take too long, this step. You just wanna whisk until your egg is broken down and everything's combined, okay? Perfect. All right. Side. And now, moving on to step number 4, we're going to add the wet mixture to the dry ingredients. So I'm gonna bring back this bowl and I'm just gonna pour this right in my dry ingredients, okay? All of it in there. Perfect. Set that aside. And I'm just gonna start whisking it. You'll notice that on the next step, you're going to slowly pour in your hot water as you mix. If you were to just mix the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients that we have in here right now, which is the oil, the egg, and the vanilla sugar, it would get really, really thick and you wouldn't be able to mix it. So that's where the hot water comes in. You'll notice in some of the tips in your booklet, it talks about blooming cocoa. So I totally recommend you go ahead and read what that means because that process is happening as soon as we add the hot water. So it's super cool. Okay, so I'm going to whisk with my dominant hand and then use my left hand to slowly pour in my hot water. If you're doing this with a sibling, one of you can be mixing while the other person pours, or if you're doing it with a friend, there's plenty of steps for a lot of people to be doing it once, okay? Perfect. Awesome. All right, that's all my water. And I'm just gonna continue to whisk it until there are no lumps. It's a thin batter, so don't worry if you think it should be thicker. It should be nice and thin, okay? Awesome, so that was step number 5. We added in our hot water while we continue to whisk. And the next step is going to be pouring it into our prepared pan. And like I said earlier, if you want to line your pan with parchment paper, you can do that. Or you can just grease it with any non-stick spray that you prefer, okay? So I'm gonna do that and I'm gonna throw it in the oven, which is step number 7. So I'll read through that before I do it. Step number 7 says to bake for 25 to 30 minutes, and you can use a toothpick to insert it in your cake to check that it's done, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll come back here when I go to make the buttercream. Okay, so while my cake bakes in the oven, I'm going to move on to the buttercream. So this is step number 8. To make the frosting, place the softened butter into a bowl and whisk until creamy. So I have my softened butter right here, 3 tablespoons. Okay. And I'm just gonna put it right in my bowl. Sometimes I find that when I'm making buttercream and I'm using a whisk, oftentimes the powdered sugar and the butter will get stuck inside of my whisk. So sometimes it's easiest just to use a fork, okay? So I'm just gonna cream my butter using my fork. Press it down. And if you don't have softened butter, if it's just coming out of the fridge, you can just place it in the microwave for a few seconds until it comes to room temp, or at least it's a little bit softer. That way it's easier to whisk your buttercream or mix like I am here with my fork. And if your butter is too cold, it's gonna make a lumpy, not so smooth buttercream, okay? So it's super important. Okay, so my butter is nice and creamy, so now I'm gonna go ahead and add in the confectioner sugar, cocoa, and vanilla sugar. That is step number 9. Yep, step number 9. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this in, and then it says also that you should add in the milk as you whisk until it's smooth and fluffy, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and open both of these and pour right of them, and pour both of them right in my bowl, okay? do one at a time, maybe that'll be easier. Perfect. That was my confectioner sugar. And next is my cocoa powder. Okay. Get it all in there. This doesn't want to come out. Come on. Okay. And there we go. That cocoa powder did not want to come out of the bag. Okay. Set that aside. Alright, and like the directions said, I'm just going to scrape my fork along the side of the bowl. So get some of the butter out. And I'm just going to mix it, and then I have my my milk right here. And I'm going to slowly add it as I mix. Alright. So my buttercream has come together really nice. This is how it looks. It's nice and creamy, it's smooth, there's no lumps of cocoa powder or powdered sugar. Okay, and it holds up nicely just like this, okay? So while I wait for my cake to cool, I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside. And this is a time where you could go through your educational activity or read some of the really cool baking tips in your booklet. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of clean up a bit, and then we'll get to the fun part. Okay, so my cake is out of the oven, it's cooled for a bit. So I'll show you guys right here. This is how it looks. And let me get my booklet back open. So we are on step number 10. So we made our frosting, our cake is cooled, it's baked, everything like that, okay? So step number 10, let's go for it. It says once the cake is cooled completely, crumble it up, making sure there are no large lumps. And step number 11 says to add the frosting and mix it all together using a fork. So to crumble your cake, you can either use your hands, or in one of your steps you'll see that you can use a fork as well, and it's super helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna use my fork and break apart my cake so there's no big lumps in here. You can do this in a separate bowl, or like I'm doing here, I'm just doing it right in the pan that it was baked in. Less dishes. Alright, so I'm just going to crumble this all together. You want to crumble it completely, there are no big lumps, before you add the buttercream, okay? Okay, so my cake is nice and crumbled. I'll give you a little peek here how it looks. Okay? Completely crumbled. There's no big pieces. You want to make sure that you especially get the edges, because sometimes the edges of your cake get a little bit of crisp to it, and if you have a hard crust or anything like that, it could not roll as nicely into that nice ball shape that you want for your cake tops, okay? So now step number 11, like I said, was to add the frosting and mix it all together using a fork. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and add in all my frosting. I'm going to use my spoon here, over here, just so it's easier to scoop all this out. Perfect. Alright. Set that aside. And I'm just going to mix everything all together. Alright, so it's coming together nicely. This is how it looks. Whoops, spilling it out of my pan. This is how it looks. It's nice and broken down, it's evenly combined. Alright, so back. Alright, now it is time to scoop them, okay? So we're getting to the fun part. Scoop the cake pops into 1 hefty tablespoon balls and gently roll and press together until they form a nice ball. Continue scooping and rolling all the dough, okay? Okay, so I just got a pan and I have some parchment paper. And I'm going to start scooping all my cake pops, okay? like the directions said, you want to scoop them into 1 hefty tablespoon bowl. So you can use your measuring spoons if you need to. I'm just going to go ahead and use a spoon here. If you want to, sometimes what's helpful is to measure the first, maybe 2 or 3 as your model size cake pops. That way you can try and replicate the first few that you measured to look, so they get all the same size, roughly the same size. So if you want to make them bigger, go for it. You just might not get as many, okay? So keep that in mind if you want to make a bit bigger cake pops, but be careful not to make them too big because sometimes when cake pops are too large, they don't stay on the stick nicely and they end up falling off when you go to dip them, and that's no fun. Okay, so I finished rolling out all my cake pops, and now I'm going to take my sticks and pop it right into each of the cake pops, okay? So the important part with this is that you just want to support the cake pop on both sides so you don't worry about cracking it, or it helps you to kind of tell how deep you're going because you don't want to poke it all the way through and then have it come out the other end, right? So I'm just gently poking them in, making sure that they don't crack. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these in the freezer for about an hour, and then we will come back and dip them and sprinkle them, okay? Okay, so my cake pops are almost ready to come out of the freezer. So while I wait for the last few minutes, I'm just going to open up my bag of dark chocolate, and I'm going to pour it right into a microwave safe bowl. Okay. And you want to microwave these in 30-second increments, okay? So 30 seconds, mix it around, 30 seconds, mix it, and then until it's completely melted, okay? So I'm also going to take my sprinkles and just get them ready by pouring them in another bowl. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and microwave this, and then we'll be ready to dip. All right, so my dark chocolate is completely melted. It's nice and smooth. I'm going to give it one more mix. And then I'm going to grab my cake pops, take them out of the freezer, and we'll start dipping. Alright, so the most important part when you're dipping your cake pops is that you go slow and you're gentle with it. You're careful that your cake pops don't fall off the sticks, and that you have fun with it. That's also the most important part, okay? Alright, so I'm going to pick up my cake pop. I'm going to dip it in the dark chocolate, coat it as close as I can to the top, and then I'm just going to let some of the extra chocolate drip. And then since I'm going to be dipping it right into the sprinkles, I'm just going to scrape the bottom of it so I get some of that excess chocolate off, and then go right into my sprinkles. Okay? Just going to swirl it around like that, and then put it right on my cookie sheet. And then I'm just going to continue that for all the rest. Okay, so all of my cake pops have been dipped in the chocolate and the sprinkles. I'm going to go ahead and put them back in the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes before I eat them. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful. And like I said, if you fell behind at one point, rewind it, pause it, do whatever you have to do. I hope that you guys enjoy these and have so much fun making them. Thanks!